Hello and welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotelo Esquire, wrestling's premier photographer, Dr. Mike Leno, and Evan Ginsberg, the one and only. Hey, do you want to introduce our guest for tonight? It's been a while since we've had him on the show.
Want me to?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. Kris Krayven, a.k.a. Father Krayven, is one of those great heel managers that harken us back to the days of Lou Albano and Fred Blassie and the Grand Wizard. Great talker, great character.
Buddy Sotelo.
But I always mention you with the Wizard and Albano and Blassie. But anyway, Kris Krayven has worked the indie circuit for many years. He was trained to be a wrestler, but got injured in the process, if I remember your story correctly. And here he is, many years later. He's still out there entertaining the fans on, Triple H talks with dismissive, Elks Lodges and VFW halls. But you know what? On the right night with the right crew and guys like Kris Krayven, it's a lot more fun than corporate wrestling. That's a long-winded way of introducing my friend, Kris Krayven. How are you, Kris?
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. I am humbled by your kind words. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
So speaking of many, many years, I think it's been since 2021 since we had you on the show. So,
years.
Yeah, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what's been new in your life since 2021. Now we're in 2024.
Well, this past year, I wound up with a protege. We just happened to meet up by luck or chance, and he really took to the business, and I've been helping training him and find people to train him, and he's my number one disciple at this time. We've christened him Mason Carnage, and he's climbing up the ranks, putting a hurting on anybody that comes in his way.
You mean Carnage isn't his birth name? Yes.
Actually, that comes from some deep, dark depth circle in the bottom of my mind somewhere. I
had a masked wrestler that I managed named Mr. Massacre. So I get you. That those death last names are a real good seller for guys.
You call him Carney for short.
That's it. You got to come up with something that's going to grab the audience. And trust me, when this guy comes out of the curtain, he grabs the audience. He looks like a cross between Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers, mixed in with a little bit of Kris Krayven's madness there.
That's great. So what feds are you working with now?
Right now, we were working with New Evolution Wrestling. Unfortunately, they shut down. They reopened under a different manager and shut down once again. We were working with Colossal Championship Wrestling. They shut down. So primarily we're working with Gino Caruso and ECPW. And I cannot say enough about Gino Caruso. I mean, I never thought I'd be in the wrestling business again. And I just walked up to him one day on somebody's suggestion and just said, I would like to, try something. I've been trained. I've been out of the business for a while, but do you think you could work with me? And Gino was gracious enough to give me a break in the business. And it just took off from there. I started out in a pair of blue jeans and a leather jacket, and I've evolved into Father Krayven.
Can I ask, is Gino, did he wrestle like 30 years ago on Dennis Coraluzzo shows?
I know he wrestled. I know he wrestled for some WWE shows, but
Gino's a wrestler. He's a wrestler and a trainer. Yeah.
He's been around for a long time. He does a lot of work out in New Jersey now. He steps in the ring now and again, but he mostly does promoter behind the scenes stuff, and a lot of his stuff is in New Jersey, upstate New York. From what I'm hearing, the New York State Athletic Commission has made it really hard for promotions to wrestle in New York at this time, which is sad.
Why?
I heard that one of the things Gino used to do was he used to rent out his license to other promotions, and they have put a stop to that. You need your own license. And from what I understand, in order to get the license, you need a $10,000 bond in the bank just to have the license. So that's very hefty in New York State.
There is no bigger joke in all of the state of California than the California State Athletic Commission and its regulation of professional wrestling in California. There's never been.
They used to have power, but they haven't been at shows. You remember that they used to come to Kirk White. Well, I saw it. I was right there. He would have to, do some monetary favors to that commissioner.
And there are sometimes feds will send over guys to pretend that they're with the state athletic commission and forge documents.
Legit because he was at MMA and boxing events. The guy was legit. But they don't have any. Unless something has changed in the last couple of years, they haven't had any jurisdiction over.
Not 20 years. I haven't seen them show up or have any.
Well, they don't because they when Vince did all that stuff, whatever it was, like
Sports Entertainment, when he got it listed.
He did not have to pay ring doctors or blah blah blah. This is what we presented, just like Ringling Brothers Circus. That was the end, at least for us, and that opened the way for Oregon and Washington, which were very restrictive athletic commissions. But California, I don't think they have. I haven't heard any promoter, not Jesse Hernandez, not the guys at Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, not up north.
No, not they never.
What are you thinking? Have they started interfering with shows or regulatory stuff?
Not here in California. It is absolutely a huge joke. And again, some people pretend to be the athletic commission and rob the feds of 5% of their take. From the night or whatever, the 15% or whatever.
They haven't done that, but I was aware Jersey and New York's athletic commissions still were tight, and they always were. They had to. Evan remembers at Madison Square Garden, you had to follow everything to the letter. There was supposed to be no fighting outside the ring.
They made the spoiler unmask. The spoiler couldn't wear a mask.
Evan remembers this too, and Moskris was the exception. But they had guys like Don Jardine, the spoiler, and El Olympico, Evan will remember, and they had to cut the hole out of their mask, really basically only at Madison Square Garden, because there was some archaic law from the 1910 that said you couldn't cover your face.
The irony was Moskris wrestled the spoiler. Moskris had the mask on. The spoiler, they made take the mask off. So it all comes down to who has the most pull or whatnot.
Well, that was because Vince Sr. really, truly wanted Moskris because people saw him on LA TV and then later on the IWA. He really wanted him there. Moskris broke that, but it was weird. That was Moskris' very first appearance. He's wrestling Don Jardine, the spoiler, and Jardine had the mask on, but the hole cut out so you could see his entire face. Like, why even put on the?
Why even bother putting that on?
That was crazy. Funny days.
So yeah, you said you were working for 2 other feds that closed, or 3 other feds that closed. Why did they close? Or do you know?
Behind the scenes stuff, they didn't have enough money to fund it. Once again, the New York State Athletic Commission with the licensing coming down and all that stuff. I don't know the full behind the scenes story, but then you have guys who are wrestlers who try to be promoters, and they overbook themselves in their own shows and make themselves, single, double, triple champions in their own shows. And it's kind of disgraceful that you're only making a promotion so that you can put yourself over. And you look like a joke when you do that. If you're the promoter, maybe you do a specialty match, maybe you wrestle here and there, but there's no way you should be the champion of your federation. That's in my belief. You should be looking out for the talent who works the hardest, who looks the best, who has the best mic work, who puts your federation over the best. That's a big problem that we run into too. I'm very much into the theatrics, and if you look on my YouTube page or my personal Facebook, or I try to put together a promo for any match. If I'm wrestling in front of 20 people in a backyard, I'm going to put together a decent promo, and I'm going to try my best to, make it the best that I can make it. I use a little theatrics in there. I use a little Facebook magic to make it look good. And you got guys that are booked in the main event and they don't even promote the show. They show up to the show 20 minutes before their match, and they leave 5 minutes after that match. And to me, I mean, as a promoter, I would look at that and be like, you know, what's this guy doing? You know, I want to see the person who's putting their heart and soul. As part of Gino's team, when it comes to, I live in Queens, New York, so I put together like a little street team. We go out and we put up flyers, and that's, you know, $10 out of my pocket, and I'll make 100 paper flyers on regular paper, and I'll go to the local grocery store and make copies, and I'll just go into like the local area and put it in their mailboxes. And that's something that's missing too, is people expect to show up, wrestle their match, and go home. There's no heart and soul into the company anymore. For a lot of these guys are showboats, or they're just starting out and they don't know any better and they're not being trained properly.
Kris has two good points, that even in our territory days, if a guy built a whole promotion around himself, like was living there, that was doomed to fail, or pushing an untalented son like George Goulas with was being pushed. And he was the promoter's son, and he just was not athletic. He wasn't a Greg Gagne or any of the Von Erichs kids that we were talking about. Plus, the other point is street teaming. That's the good old get your hands dirty to promote the show and have everybody promote it. I mean, I've seen lots of promoters where they'll, I'm sure it's true on the East Coast, you make some of the local underneath talent or the trainees, they have to sell X amount of tickets or whatever. And sometimes the wrestlers bitch about it, but you know, you bring in people and expose them to the product, and it helps. Plus, it helps having a full house there of human beings that can get into it and connect with the person that should be, or is connecting with the audience the most, the person that should be pushed.
But it's interesting, Kris, that you point that out, because people, and you know, Evan will probably nod vociferously with this, with the fact that it's the same thing in music too, where people wouldn't expect, if you were a band, to just show up and play in the band and have nothing to do with generating, you know, an audience to come see you perform. And yet in wrestling, somehow they think that that everybody else will do the work to get everyone to magically show up. Is that right, Evan?
I was a club booker for many years. I booked talent into a Manhattan nightclub, and you would be surprised how many people just would not promote their gigs. You know, oh, that's the club's job, that's their job. So, you know, it depends on the individual. There's guys like Kris who are going to hustle and, you know, move tickets and help promote a show and care. And there's other people that just going to show up and get what they can out of it. And it's more personality than a blanket statement. I've seen wrestlers that relentlessly promote, and others that, oh, by the way, in 2 hours, I'll be down at the Elks Lodge. Like, that's promotion. It's absurd.
Well, the ones that wouldn't show up to your show when you would want to help promote them, you know, when you were doing your radio show and TV show, they wouldn't show up for your.
Well, yeah, I would have TV exposure for indie wrestlers, and it wasn't like anybody was, you know, breaking the door down for these guys at the time. I mean, a few of them actually became pretty well known. Willow Nightingale used to come down, and Sonny Kiss and people like that. But for the most part, these were local indie wrestlers. And if you say, hey, I have some, you know, exposure for you, it's like, how about showing up, or at least giving the courtesy of a call why you didn't show up? So, you know, some people are their own worst enemies, and people are going to float in and out of the industry endlessly. And there's people that are totally driven, that are going to, you know, I have this warm spot for Eddie Kingston. This guy worked New York, Kris will tell you, this guy worked New York and New Jersey indies for 15, 20 years before he finally made it. This guy loves the business and put the miles in, and, you know, the horrible indie paydays. And now the guy's a big star and he's making good money. And every once in a while you get a story like that where it all works out for the best. And much respect to guys like that who have the fortitude to deal with all the BS. And
Bryan Danielson's another one, who
yeah,
really,
people think because they were in Ring of Honor, they were making big money. They weren't. I mean,
believe it or not, MJF started with Gino Caruso. MJF wrestled for Gino Caruso.
I didn't know that.
Yes,
wow.
he wrestled local shows in Long Island, New Jersey, and he built himself up. And he's one of the best to do it today, as far as I'm concerned. His mic skills.
Who broke him in? I forget who broke MJF in.
I forget who broke him in, but I know he worked with Gino for a while, and he did shows in Long Island because ECPW has a Long Island territory. And
Did you do any shows with him?
No, I didn't. But the guy that I'm training, Mason Carnage, he did practice with him before I met him, so he had run-ins with him. Yes, not to say that they're friends or anything, but he had time with him in the ring.
I think if MJF stays healthy, he has the potential to be another Roddy Piper, one of the greatest heels in history. This guy's a total package, and unfortunately, he's had some injuries the past year, but
in the last couple of years, he really put the work in on his body too. He not only looks great, he can walk, and he can work great. That's the mix right there. If you can look great, work great, and talk great, you're bound to.
He's a total package and an original. I mean, he put it all together. You just hope he stays healthy.
Do you think Vince McMahon will eventually just throw a ton of money at him, or do you think
Vince is out of the picture? Vince is.
Well, I'm sorry.
In this case, Paul Levesque would.
With this point, the WWE, I guess I get so used to making Vince, and I still think somehow he's working behind the scenes. I bet you there's still some way that Vince still has his tendrils.
Tendrils sounds about right.
Yes, his something from War of the Worlds. I'm thinking he's in one of those. Yeah, well, he's in one of those tombs. One of those status chambers, and he's got a bunch of electronic mechanical arms that do all his bidding for him. Yeah.
Let me throw this at Kris before we go, because I saw Roddy Piper when he basically first started, and he came.
You may be going. We're staying, but you may be.
He came to our territory, but this guy, not just a wrestler, but he was managing, and then also he was helping. When Gene LaBelle brought him in to help do some booking, and then he did the fourth thing, the quartet of things, where they sent him down. He had a couple of tours for the Luderup, what is now CMLL, EMLL, the oldest promotion on the planet at 83 or 93 years as a promotion. But he picked up the heel ref thing. So Piper wrestles, heel manages a ton of guys, early Outlaw Ron Bass, Adrian Adonis when he was using his real name, Keith Franks, etc., and booking, and then doing the heel ref gimmick that you see so prevalent. You turn on AAA Lucha, and they've been doing that since its inception from 1992 when AAA started, 91, with heel ref El Tarantes. So suspenders is what that name translates to. And now his kid is doing the heel ref gimmick, and they have a guy in the opposing CMLL promotion. So Roddy Piper was not the wrestler that MJF is. He was great at a lot of things, but he, as evidenced by the Bryan Danielson, that 1 hour thing that they had, that the match was similar to the Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart 1 hour deal. And he kept up with Bryan Danielson. So, yeah, that guy's a total package. He and Eddie Kingston are really, for me, the highlights of a sometimes chaotic AEW. I mean, especially Eddie Kingston is like the realest guy in the room. I forget whose tagline that used to be, but that's
Swerve. When Swerve comes on, he swerves also.
Somebody, I don't know if it wasn't Rodney Dangerfield.
No, that was Enzo, the realest guy in the room. Enzo was the realest guy in the room.
Oh yeah, Enzo. Yeah, well, Enzo's another one that can do pretty much a ton of things. Did you guys see him? Did he kind of grow up in the Jersey area with Big Cass, or no?
From what I heard, he did, and just recently I was on a show with him in ECPW, he was over in Queens, and pretty cool guy. He kept to himself for the most part, but talked to him for a few minutes, and he seemed decent.
Oh yeah, no, super nice guy at the WrestleCon last April. He was asking anybody that would, he was out walking around the halls and he was asking anybody. He wanted to get to England. He wanted to wrestle in England. That was on his bucket list. He's asking anybody, going up to some of the British guys that were there from AEW and WWE. So, yeah, really nice guy. Before I go to, I want to ask you guys. So Evan was starting to talk about the Von Erich movie, and of course Gary Hart, one of the greatest talker, manager, heels, and early on as a wrestler with bleach blonde hair. Kris, who are some of your favorite managers in terms of, not just talking, because managers like Heyman is brilliant pretty much every.
Heyman's the best at what he does. Paul Heyman is the best at what he does. There's no managing better than Paul Heyman. And if you watch my stuff, you'll see that I take some cues from Paul Heyman. He starts out with ladies and gentlemen. So one day, just by accident, we wound up doing a show in Jersey, and the accident was I usually come out with a cane or a chalice or something. My son is usually my gear guy. He packs all the stuff in the car and gets my stuff ready. He forgot the cane. So I said, like, what am I going to do? Like I said, give me an open mic. So what am I going to say now? So I'm thinking to myself, like, what could I say? I'm a priest, whatever, sinners. And then I come out and I say, and it's now my tagline. Whenever I come out, I grab the microphone, heathens and sinners. My name is Father Krayven. And I stole that right from Paul Heyman with, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul Heyman. And it pops the crowd. I get a lot of boos out of it. It's just, he's very, very good at what he does. And I take a lot of cues from him. One of my favorite managers growing up was Captain Lou Albano. There was nobody nuttier than the captain.
You know what his name was before the captain? The Vince McMahon Jr. used to call him Looney Lou.
Yes.
On the shows. Albano, there was nobody that could touch him. I'm sorry. Fred was great. And I've said this to Evan too. I was sent a tape when the captain in '73 was managing the original Moondog, Lonnie Main and Blassie, and the three of them were like trying to elbow the other person out because all three were tremendous talkers, but Albano won that one. No one more fun. And those are magical times. Evan, any thoughts on the captain too? Because we miss him, and we were around him. You remember in Burbank and other places.
Yeah, I was on the road with Lou doing autograph appearances. I'll tell you a funny story. At Chilla, one of the big horror and sci-fi comic conventions, we brought in some of the wrestlers, and I'm sitting there with Lou in the lobby, and he's looking at all the cosplayers with the Star Wars and the horror gimmicks. And he's laughing at them, like, look at this guy, look at this guy. Meanwhile, he's got all the rubber bands in his beard and his face, So, yeah, him with the Valiant Brothers. I tell this to people all the time. It was like improvisational, like jazz musicians, just like riffing off of each other. Like Johnny was like the funniest guy alive. And he would say something, and that would set Lou off. And Lou would say something, and that would set Jimmy off. And it was total improv. Johnny said to me, the young fans don't grasp this. Johnny used to say to me, we go into the studio to cut the promos all day, and they would just go, for example, February 16, Philadelphia Spectrum, Dean Ho and Tony Gurria. And then the whole thing was improv. It wasn't this scripted, stilted, robotic, nonsense that they're fed today in WWE. These guys were like they
don't have a 1,000-page manual of the things they can't say.
All of my promos that I put on, I look up the material, or I find it, or I write it, or I just do it right on the fly. And half the time I write down just ideas and spit it from that. And you got to see, like, if I ever get a chance, I'll have to share a blooper reel with you, because the bloopers that come out of it, we have more fun laughing about making the promo than actually making the promo. And that's what keeps us together. Like, Mason has become like a pseudo son to me. So because we're tight, we travel the road together when we go to shows. We talk in the car. We sit and we critique his matches together. I feel like I am a manager to him in the sense of I try to get him bookings. I'm there for him for traveling. I'm there for him as like a father figure. He only lives like 10 minutes from me. So
Nice.
not only are we intertwined in the wrestling business, we're intertwined in our personal life. And that personal connection makes our connection in the ring better. And I think that's what a lot of guys are missing, today is, oh, I work Monday through Friday and I'm off on the weekends and I only work 6 hours or 2 hours. All that time in the car is where you learn your business. I mean, we came up with his theme music in the car on a ride to New Jersey one day, and we put together, we started cutting and pasting and taping and all this other crap with the iPhone, which is what you can do today. But we were playing around in the car, like 6 of us sitting in a car playing around. And, oh my God, that's perfect, and we'll use that, And that's a lot of what's missing today is the road travel and the stories of the road. You learn how to wrestle on the road. What you do in the ring is afterwards is what I believe. A lot of it you're going to learn on the road.
I've got to go, but that's where young guys, if they just shut up and they listen to the veterans, you're going to absorb so much. And the road trips, that's like a lot of the magic is right there. The camaraderie where you build, rapport. So many things can happen in there, and they're all really positive. And of course, the Mr. Fuji like ribs.
Yeah,
that stuff. Where he got his mean streak, and then I got to go. I really love hearing from Corey and Ev, of course, and Russ. But early on, a lot of the boys pulled a lot of mean ribs in the late '60s, particularly in Portland, Oregon, on Mr. Fuji, and I forget. I'll look it up. I forget who was on that particular in the car, but they, I don't know what they put in his strength, but he was couldn't be wakened up. And they're on, still en route. They found some big hotel, or maybe it was the hotel where they stayed at, and there was, the swimming pool, and they took all of Fuji's clothes off and put him on a raft. And
that's funny.
Well, and so when the sun came up and he finally starts waking up, and there were all these horrified women who called the police and shit. So I think that's where he started going from gentle rib artists like a Vic and Ted Christie to kind of a mean guy. And particularly in the Tri-WF, you didn't F with Harry Fujiwara because you would be the recipient of some of these ribs. I think that's where it came from, these ornery ribs. He got picked on so much, you kind of lash out. And he was the master. I think Dynamite Kid, obviously, and obviously Kern Hennig. Those were the guys. So you guys have a terrific show.
You too, Mike.
Keep coming.
We'll see you next week.
Thanks.
Thank you for being on this week. All right, now it's just the 3 of us. So
here we are.
Even more room for everybody. I wanted to find out how you managed to meet Mason and how did that relationship get started?
Well, believe it or not, the truth of the story is I was walking one day to my daughter's preschool, and he was sitting there waiting for his daughter, and he's wearing a wrestling t-shirt. And, just me being the guy that I am, I looked down and I said, "Hey, kid, you like wrestling?" And he goes, "Like wrestling. I was training to be a wrestler." And I said, "Oh, boy, we got to talk."
That's
so we just started talking, and he told me he was from Ozone Park. I grew up in Richmond Hill. So I said, we're practically brothers, And
Ozone Park, really?
Yeah, he grew up in Ozone Park. Yes.
Wow, I haven't heard that mentioned in a little while. That's where my original family, my dad's family, lived in Ozone Park, and they had farmland out there. They owned a bunch of farmland.
Wow.
Yeah, and then they sold it all during the Depression for nothing. And now it's worth, multi-millions of dollars. It's one of the great Jackman family what ifs. But
yeah,
there's no farmland in Ozone Park anymore. I'll tell you.
No. But we used to have a dairy out there. Anyway, so continue on.
We wound up talking, and then we'd hang out a couple of times, and he wasn't sure if he was going to step back in the ring. He didn't know what he wanted to do. So I finally convinced him to give it a shot. He did a couple of practice ones with Rage, who's local to the Queens community. And, you know, you get that itch. You want to get back into it. So he had a couple ideas of what he wanted to call himself. And I've always had these characters in my head. Like, you know, every great manager or wrestler has a couple of personalities kicking around in his head. So I came up with the idea for his character, and my son actually drew his gear, and we took it to a designer and had the designer design it.
That's
and
nice.
Lo and behold, Mason Carnage was born, and his backstory is he's a released lunatic from the Bellevue Mental Hospital. And the true story is when he was a child, he had a lot of issues, and his mother put him away a couple of times. So
wow.
When truth becomes reality, you know.
Nothing's better work than when it's a shoot.
Yes, exactly. That's like in my backstory, I'm really a ordained Christian minister, and I use that as my.
And I'm really an attorney, so you know, it's funny how that works out that way.
It really works out. I mean, the first time I showed up with the gear and the gimmick, Gino just was like, "Wow, that's different."
How did you become an ordained minister?
My best friend wanted to get married, and we sat around and joked about it one day. I said, you know, it'd be funny if I married you to your wife. And he was like, yeah, that would be funny. And then I went online and I looked it up, and it didn't cost that much. It was very inexpensive. And they just sent you all the paperwork, and you filled it out, and that was it. And the next thing you know, you have the certificate. You go down to City Hall, they put you on the registry. And I'm a legally ordained Christian minister. I can marry a goat to a pig.
Nice. Now, do you get some blowback from like people who are really religious that, you know, say
believe it or not, we had some shows booked out in the Rockaway area, and they canceled once they saw my promos.
Ouch. Wow.
They took themselves a little too serious, and that's, you know, that's a line that I have to walk. And you know what? I sit back and I say, you know, I could just add that to my resume. The Catholic Church canceled the show because Father Krayven was too much for them.
Wow. Wow.
We got together with a Catholic church over in Howard Beach, and we're going to be using them to do some shows over that way. So we'll have to work. And the priest said, like, you have to change with the times, you know. And I don't do anything blasphemy, anything against, you know. I try to keep it tasteful.
No animal sacrifices.
No animal sacrifices.
Yeah.
But I'm still a heel, you know, so I'm going to cut it out. And most of the time I'm not even using Bible references or anything like that. I'm just coming up with wording and the way it sounds to, you know, benefit, you know, my character and my Chargers character. With the way I look at it, it's their loss, because it could be a great fundraiser, and it's a great character that gets a lot of heat from the fans. So if they don't want to book it, it's their loss. And Gino sees the promise in it. You know, I was fortunate enough to be trained by Mr. Big on how to be a manager, and he saw that I had.
He is a great guy. He's been on a show a number of times.
He saw that I had something, and you know, he said, let's bring it out in you and see where we go with this. And he basically helped me come up with the Father Krayven character. And it works. It's morphed. It's changed a little. It's, you know, little tweaks, little things here and there. But I had the gimmick. I just needed somebody to work the gimmick with. And Mason really doesn't say much. He's, you know, escaped lunatic, mute. So that works. I can use my voice. I could do the talking. I could do the genuflex, whatever you need. And he comes in as the big bad brute. He says one or two words, and he's going to wreck all havoc. And
I love that. As a manager, I got to admit, that's the perfect guy to have as your charge. The big side of beef, and you do all the talking, and you write all the checks, and he has to cash them.
That's it.
Yeah, that was always one of my favorite gimmicks. So I had the same thing going with Mark Bison Smith when he was Super Destroyer 2000. He was under a mask, and I told him, don't ever even talk, just grunt and be menacing and do pantomime stuff, and I'll do the rest of it. I'll do all the talking, and it worked out really well for the two of us. I can imagine it's a lot of fun. You know, Evan and I also have a discussion about this, and I bet you would feel the same way. You probably never work blue either. You don't swear or use any kind of profanity.
No need.
And you know, that is one thing that I think is unfortunate for a lot of indie shows, is how much the guys unnecessarily swear to the audience.
Yeah, it's there's no need for that. I could captivate a crowd with 2 sentences, and
That's the thing. That's the thing. You don't have to. You can be so insulting to people. And in fact, I find sometimes it works better if you don't work blue, because the insults come from a higher level and are more cutting.
We do a show like once a year in Broad Channel. They have a big football field over there. And my wife is from Broad Channel, so she'll get a lot of our friends to come. And the biggest insult I could give to them is, "What's that smell? Must be in Broad Channel. God flushed his toilet bowl again."
Wow, funny.
Talk about heat, and they want to strangle you. And I didn't say anything terrible, you know.
No, but it's insulting. Yes,
exactly.
That you can insult without being profane. You can insult without being blue. You can insult, especially you can insult without being racist or being bigoted. You know, those were things that I wanted to make a line at. And, you know, and a lot of indie shows, guys just think, okay, any kind of heat is good heat, but it's not good to bring in something that's racial. It's not good to bring in something to scream F to a little kid, to like an 8-year-old. You know, you don't want to be swearing right in the face of an 8-year-old. You wouldn't let someone do that at your house to your 8-year-old.
No, I remember one of my first shows, we were doing a show in Brooklyn, and must have been 25 people there, and this mother had her little son, and the son kept coming up and taunting me. And at the time, I was doing a homage to Kevin Sullivan. I wasn't Father Krayven yet. I was the Prince of Purgatory at the time. And I had the black eyes going on and the black hood. And all I did was turn around and yell at the kid, "What are you looking at?" I bet you to this day that kid still has nightmares about me.
Yeah.
The kid went running off and crying to his mother. His mother was, "You brute, blah, blah." She wanted to kill me, and I didn't do anything wrong. I just gave him a receipt for what he was giving me. You know, I didn't curse at him. I didn't do anything except scare the living pants out of him with what he was giving to me. I gave right back to him. You know.
Yeah, no, that's the so like what? So tell me, like, what you would consider, like, as a manager, your greatest match that you managed.
One of the we've had quite a few. One of my favorite matches so far has been, believe it or not, it wasn't even a managerial role. This past summer, Gino convinced me that I had to get back in the ring, and
how old are you?
I'm 48 years old.
Holy crap. Okay.
What we did was Mason was running a program with Ben Benedetto, who's big time face, and wound up that I kept interfering in the matches. So Gino came to the rescue, and then Tony the Bulldog came to the rescue. So we put teams together, and we had caged heat over the summer, and it was a war game style match. And there was 5-on-5 war games in a steel cage, and I was one of the war games member.
Oh my God.
Most fun. If you look up on my YouTube page, we have the YouTube page, the Covenant Catacombs. One of the most fun things I've done in a long time. And, you know, they always say never say never. And, you know, by putting my body back in shape and getting, you know, I'm nowhere near the shape I was 35 years ago, but just to be able to.
Aren't we all? Except Evan.
DDP Yoga.
There you go. I'm promoting it. DDP Yoga. Evan knows. But just to be able to go in there and have fun. And that's what the whole night was. It was like 15 minutes of fun for all of us.
Oh, man, I would have been petrified. Wait until you get north of 50, by the way. All that stuff really changes. You know,
unfortunately, I never had a wrestling career. So for me to be able to step back into the ring and, you know, have somebody who wanted me to step in the ring, that felt really good. And afterwards, to get a lot of compliments. "Oh my God, I didn't know you could sell that good. Oh, I didn't know you could do this that good." And just being a student of the game and wanting to do that for so long. And if I never stepped foot in the ring again to wrestle, I think there might be one more left in me, but you never know.
Very Bobby Heenan-esque of you.
Yes, I'd be very happy where I am. I'm very happy doing the manager gig. Hopefully in the next year, 2 years, we expand a little. Mason gets some company, and we'll see how that goes. But if not, I'm very happy managing Mason. I think, he has a lot of promise, and I wouldn't put my neck on the line for him if I didn't believe in him.
But what would you say would be your, like, as a manager, your highlight match? What would you submit to the Wrestling Hall of Fame if you could? The one match that you managed.
There was a match. I'm trying to think of the two guys that wrestled, but I stole a Bobby Heenan spot where I tripped the guy, and he was going for the suplex from the outside to the inside of the ring. And I came up, I tripped the guy and held his foot like Bobby Heenan did with the Ultimate Warrior and Rick Rude.
Sure.
I stole it right from Bobby Heenan. I forget the two guys that wrestled, but that match seemed to go the way it was planned to go. Like everything went the way it was planned. And just recently, when Mason first broke in, I wrote step for step one of his first matches. I actually booked the match against his opponent, and I wrote the match out step for step. And I sent it to both of them. They went over it. And that's not something you hear of. It's like, you know, on the indie shows, they try to talk right before the match and let's do this, let's do that. These guys had a couple of weeks, step to step, and it was against the guy Geronimo Gomez, who Evan loves that name.
The best name ever.
Geronimo Gomez. And for the most part, the match.
He's from Switzerland, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
But the match came out very, very well, and I was very pleased with it. Gino was very pleased with the outcome of the way it worked. And it was maybe like 20, 25 steps, like headlock, do this, do that, do this, which is something I always wanted to do. I always wanted to book matches or, you know, like plan them a little bit in advance. Not necessarily script, but, you know, plan it a little bit in advance so that they had an idea of which way it was going. Because with him being green, sometimes he has trouble remembering what's coming next. And he's still getting into the you know, wrestling mode.
Nice. Now, what is the greatest champion you've managed?
Mason Carnage is going to be the greatest champion ever.
But he doesn't have a belt now. Doesn't have a belt now. Who
No,
have
he
you
doesn't.
managed to sell the belt?
Have I managed any champions yet? I don't think I've managed any champions yet. No champions.
Wow. Well, some booker is really missing out then, because you'd be great. As Evan, you got some other questions here for?
I wanted to ask you guys if you saw the Iron Claw yet.
Yes, I did. As a moviegoer, it was a great movie. As a wrestling fan, there's a lot of holes you could push into it. You know, a lot of holes you could punch into it. Like one of my scenes that I had to laugh at, that a lot of us wrestling fans laughed at. Ric Flair asking him to go out for a drink afterwards. Back then, heels and faces never be seen together, never. So for him to ask, you know, the Von Erich, let's go out and paint the town red or whatever he said to him, I was like, yeah, that ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, I saw it Thursday night, and I had very mixed emotions about it. It was a quality film. The cinematography was beautiful. The acting was stellar. There were scenes that were just devastating. For example, when Doris, Fritz's wife, is crying because she's putting on the same black dress to bury another child. It was just devastating. Yeah. And
heart-wrenching.
however, I sat there and it reminded me of when I saw Will Smith playing Muhammad Ali, and the whole movie you go, that doesn't look like Muhammad Ali. That's Will Smith. And Fritz, the actor that played Fritz, looked like Fritz, but the kids, for the most part,
they didn't look
Von Erich brothers, they did not look like the Von Erichs. And Zac Efron, to his credit, you know, put on a lot of muscle, but he was built more like Kerry than Kevin.
Yeah.
Yep. And the actor that played Kerry was a half a foot shorter. It was almost ridiculous. And they were such good actors that with suspension of disbelief, you know, you can make it work. But
knowing that most audiences aren't that familiar.
Exactly.
Know, too. Like a lot of people just go to see it for the movie, or they're new wrestling fans. They're not old heads like us.
What the problem was, ultimately, it's relentlessly grim. It's grim. It's one.
How are you going to put a smiley face on the Von Erich story?
Well,
let's make it happy.
They tried, because what they did was, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, they have a scene where they're reunited in heaven, but of course there's no Kris because they didn't put the character in the movie.
That was
Kris was working in Indy in heaven somewhere.
Yeah.
That was one of the big black eyes on the movie. A lot of people said was they don't understand why Kris Von Erich wasn't mentioned, and the directors and editors, they felt that it would have been too over the top to put him in. But I'm like,
It happened.
A family story with leaving a family member out. That would be like telling my family story and how we all are estranged, and you leave just, okay, we don't talk about that brother or that sister, you know.
Yeah.
Although, if in these days with people filing lawsuits, then sometimes you do have to leave a family member out.
The thing that bothered me the most about the film, there's a scene where Kevin is running WCCW, and he sells to Jerry Jarrett, and Fritz had said to him, if you sell our company, you are not welcome in my house anymore. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said. Yeah. I'm not your dad anymore. And they never resolved it. They just left that hanging.
Yeah.
Because ultimately the wife leaves him. That's not in the movie. Fritz gets cancer and dies. That's not in the movie. But, the film is about this overbearing taskmaster of a father, and the kids are all, fighting for his love and affection. And you don't see, did they ever resolve it?
No.
Kevin and Fritz. It's just left hanging.
And his expectations on those children led them to what happened, and it's sad. It's very sad.
Oh, Kevin wanted it. He wanted to be a star, and but Mike wanted to be a musician. He was a guitarist and a singer in a rock band. He did this to appease his dad, at least as far as the movie shows, and it was just it was like when you're watching the Titanic and you're waiting for the boat to go down in the film. It's like these all-American, fun-loving kids, one by one, they're not going to end well. Yeah. And it's
not were the Kennedy family of wrestling,
Yeah, or the Grahams. If you want to do another film, oh my God, Eddie Graham, Mike Graham, and the grandson all committed suicide.
And then right after that, have the Chris Benoit story. Then you're really gonna make audiences fall in love with pro wrestling. It
was artfully done. I respected the film. It's just hard to enjoy something that's just...
It's not meant to, it's not, but you knew going into it, it wasn't going to be an uplifting, make you feel good movie, because we know how it all ends.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you're watching a film on Kennedy and you're hoping he doesn't get shot in the head.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wonder how this one's going to end.
But I did want to bring up because I was thinking about this today, because I knew you would talk a little bit about the Iron Claw, which I haven't seen. But we are in an interesting point in our wrestling history where there's a lot of introspection being done about what happened in the 80s and 90s, more than when it was going on during, in the 80s and the 90s. You didn't look back on the 70s wrestling and the 60s wrestling retrospectively. It was just wrestling just went on. And now we're in a mode where, not only was the excellent 350 Days made about wrestling, but we have things like the Peanut Butter Falcon, and we have things like the Iron Claw, and we have movies like Wrestling with My Family.
Dark Side of the Ring.
Yeah.
Specials and all that.
Right, Beyond the Mat. That really deep thought about how wrestling, or Heels, if you watch the Heels show, and really like certain parts of Heels, like the one, Evan hasn't seen it, but if you have, Like when they go to the wrestling fan convention in heels, there was some deep inside stuff that was talked about during that episode that you'd only know if you hung out with wrestlers.
Yeah, I agree.
There was stuff.
I heard that show didn't get re-signed either.
No, it didn't. It's a tragedy. It's a modern day Greek.
Glow also, they left a lot of plot threads unresolved. Glow was great.
Yes.
Glow was a great show as well. Yeah.
But it's interesting that we're now in a time where some of this deepest, dark side of the ring and all that stuff, the deepest, darkest secrets of all these things about wrestling are now being pushed to the front. What do you think that does for the industry and what it does for all of us who lived through all of this stuff and sort of were naive and just sort of smiled and clapped? I mean, we all watched Kerry Von Erich in SummerSlam, but we didn't know he had an amputated foot at the time.
Exactly. Yeah, that I found that out years later. I mean, I knew he had the motorcycle accident, but I didn't find out about the foot probably till long after he was gone.
Right. So what does that mean for us now that we're still wrestling fans, but we know all these ugly truths about?
Well, it means that rich promoters, billionaire promoters, cannot push workers beyond, human endurance. At this point, they're wrestling much lighter schedules, but you only have so many bumps on your bump card, and people don't want to lose their spot. And if they need painkillers, they're going to take it. I was at the AEW World's End pay-per-view, and MJF was wrestling with a cast on. He was the main event of a pay-per-view, and you're pushing yourself beyond common sense. Even I mean, the guy obviously was not in quote unquote ring shape, and he kind of plowed through. He's a Long Island kid, and there's a huge photo of him and Samoa Joe at the Nassau Coliseum. I mean, this is his dream, so he wasn't going to miss the main event. But at some point, you have to say your body, your health, your well-being, When you're in your late 20s, you're not thinking, wow, in my late 40s on some rainy, damp day, what is this going to feel like? I have wrestler friends who have said to me, Evan, I'm always in pain. Always in pain. Okay?
That's one of the reasons why I started doing the DDP yoga, because I'm always in pain. And I didn't have much of a career as a wrestler, but growing up as a kid, that's all we did. Like, we didn't have video games like they have today. We didn't stay in the house. We went outside and we played, just like your generation. We went outside and played. We played stickball, stoop ball. And when there was nothing else to do, we were throwing each other around, and we were wrestling on the concrete. New York City tough wrestling, giving each other suplexes on concrete, on the sidewalk, and not thinking anything of it. We didn't know how to protect ourselves back then. So a lot of, and then my mother or my family had pools, and we'd wrestle in the pool. There was always wrestling matches in the living room when my mother went out to the store. We were always wrestling as kids, and it's always been a passion. But now at almost 50 years old, I hurt a lot. My knees have taken a beating, my back has taken a beating. And then, if you put on 5-10 pounds over the holidays, your knees, your back, you start to feel that. You really start to feel that. I unfortunately had a hernia surgery back in September, so I wasn't able to work out for a couple of months. And you feel it because the weight goes on. The weight goes on a lot quicker than it comes off, I'll tell you that.
I've had wrestlers say to me, indie wrestlers, they've said to me, Evan, I've had 10, 12, 15 concussions, but I'm coming back. And I'm like, why? No, really. I mean, don't you want to have your faculties? Don't you want to be able to talk to your kids when you're older, know who they are? I think part of what we learn with all of this is the obsessive nature of wrestling in general. Even the fans who you know, it's like a religious pilgrimage to go to WrestleMania and spend thousands and thousands of dollars. They can't all be rich. They can't all be rich. I'm sure there are people maxing out their credit cards, and you know, wrestling can be very destructive. I've seen one indie promoter after another burn through their life savings.
Oh,
My friend Gordon Scazzeri ended up dying in a welfare hotel. He burned through two inheritances.
wow.
And died in a welfare hotel. I was at his memorial.
That's always been the black mistress of the business. Is, you know, you love it so much and you're passionate about it that you're willing to do anything for it, which it turns out sad a lot of times.
I mean, that's the whole thing about the Von Erichs, is it's, you know, you want, fame is the Icarus, you know, are the wings of Icarus for all of us. And that,
but if you see the movie, it's more than fame. It was pleasing Dad. It was,
well, but for Fritz,
based on is pleasing.
But for Fritz, it was all about fame.
Yes,
for him, he wanted the kids to fulfill his failures. He wasn't the NWA World Champion, and that's what he wanted for the kids. And there's a scene at the beginning of the movie that's also devastating. There's one devastating scene after another where he gives the list. Who's his favorite son, second favorite, third favorite, and least favorite?
Oh, I have to do that with my twins. I have to.
Yeah. He says this in front of them, and their faces drop. Okay? So, you know, the Von Erich kids, at least as far as the movie, you know, I didn't live there, obviously. At least as far as the movie tells it, you know, they were doing this for their dad's love, and it turned deadly.
Yeah, no, it all just goes to, you know, show you that if since you're not a parent, Evan, but you are, Kris, and trying to program your kids, you know, and make them something that you want them to be versus what they want to be. It never ends well. I've
always left the door open. I have a son and two daughters, and I'm not going to hide it from them. I have a passion for the business. I watch the pay-per-views. I throw parties at my house for Royal Rumble, WrestleMania. I don't hide it from them. I got my daughter sells the merch. My son is my cameraman. I get them involved. But I've always left the door open. If it's something that you want to do, my heart would be there for you, and I would do everything I could to make it the best that you could be. But if not, and you don't want to do it, I'm not going to push you to do it, because the last thing I want is for you to get injured in the ring and then say, "Look, Dad, this is your fault." You know.
Last thing you want is a documentary like the Iron Claw made about your.
There you go.
Yeah, you know.
I want to go to Chris's Royal Rumble party and sit there and go, stultifying Vanilla Pablum 2 stars, and have all his guests attack me.
You'd be a hit at the party.
It's been great having you on the show. It's been great having you on the show again. We're right about at the hour mark, so I want to make sure you get a chance to plug yourself, your Fed, anything you want, you know, our fans to know about, and please, I don't want it to be 3 years before we have you on the show again.
Yes, I'd like to be honest. You know, whenever you could have me, you can look for me, Father Krayven, on Facebook, Instagram, and we have a YouTube page, The Covenant Catacombs. You can look up Mason Carnage on Facebook, Instagram. He is my #1 disciple at this time, and we're chasing right now the Empire State Championship from Super Nitro, which is a brand new title, and the next match I think is scheduled for April 27th over at Howard Beach, and Super Nitro better watch out, because we got a few tricks up our sleeve.
Promise me this: if you win the title, you can have you and Mason be on the show again. I want to interview him.
Definitely.
With the belt around him. That's our next.
He might not say much, but we could interview him.
Very, very good.
Super Nitro's a good guy too. You mind if I plug something real quick?
Please, always.
Check out Evan Ginsberg's Old School Wrestling Memories. I'm posting 10, 12 times a day, and we have some really rare, you know, 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, materials, and even earlier sometimes. And a lot of interesting threads. And also check out Wrestling Then and Now, the documentary Killer Kowalski, Nikolai Volkov, Don, Dr. Death Arnold, Homicide. That's an interesting mix. Lowlife Louis Ramos. A lot of New York indie guys are in there that Kris would know. And coming in 2024, the John Tolis book. So check that out as well. And that's pretty much, and of course, Pro Wrestling Stories. Yours truly, the senior editor, and 900 or so articles on wrestling's great history.
Nice.
It's been great having you guys on the show. Thank you so much, and we'll have you on again, Kris, really soon. We'll have you on next week, Evan, for show number 200. All right, everyone.
There you go.
Have a great weekend. Good night, everybody.
Awaken to a new reality. Tell Purgatory if that's them calling, I'm coming to take some souls.